They said you were finished. Not quietly. Not with hesitation. With a confidence that told you they had already made up their minds long before they opened their mouths. They looked at your circumstances, at the place where you had fallen, at the distance between where you were and where you had once been, and they calculated in their own understanding that the math did not work in your favor anymore. They wrote you off. And some of them did it with a smile. God says to you today, I need you to hear what I said back to them. Because when they declared you finished, heaven did not agree. When they looked at your life and saw a conclusion, I looked at your life and saw a setup. When they looked at your broken places and saw evidence of defeat, I looked at those same broken places and saw the exact material I needed to build something they would never be able to explain or take credit for. They miscalculated. They made the mistake that every person makes when they try to predict the future of someone who belongs to God. They calculated based on what they could see. They measured using human metrics. They forgot that the God who holds your life in his hands is not bound by the same limitations that bind every other force in the universe. They forgot that the story of your life is not being written by circumstances. It is being written by a God who specializes in turning the impossible into the inevitable. Let me tell you something about the people who declared you finished. They were not wrong about what they saw. The situation was dire. The circumstances were real. The evidence they were pointing to when they made their declaration was not fabricated. Things had fallen apart. Things had gone wrong in ways that were visible and measurable and undeniable. You were not in a position that looked like winning from the outside. But they were wrong about what they concluded. Because they saw the valley and assumed it was a grave. They saw the silence and assumed it was abandonment. They saw the delay and assumed it was denial. They saw the stripping away and assumed it was destruction. They looked at the process God was taking you through and they interpreted it through the lens of their own limited understanding, which told them that what looks like an ending must be an ending. They did not know that God often does his greatest work in the places that look the most like ruins. They did not know that the valley is not the destination. It is the passage. It is the place where things are stripped away that were never strong enough to make the journey with you. It is the place where God does the deep work, the hidden work, the work that cannot be done on the mountaintop because the mountaintop does not create the same conditions for the kind of transformation that changes you at the root level. You were not dying in that valley. You were being reconstructed. God says, I heard every word they spoke against you. I heard the conversations that happened in rooms you were not in. I heard the assessments they made over coffee and in passing conversations and in group messages where your name was brought up not in prayer but in judgment. I heard the conclusions they reached. I heard the finality with which they spoke about your situation as if the matter were settled and the verdict was already in. And I want you to know that I was not moved by a single word of it. Not one syllable of human conclusion has ever altered a divine plan. Not one declaration of defeat spoken over a child of God has ever had the authority to cancel what heaven already decided. The only voice that has final authority over your life is the voice that spoke you into existence. And that voice has not spoken defeat over you. That voice has not whispered finished over the landscape of your life. That voice has been speaking something entirely different, something that those who declared you finished do not have the spiritual ears to hear. That voice has been speaking restoration. That voice has been speaking elevation. That voice has been speaking the kind of comeback that does not just return you to where you were before but launches you into something so far beyond your previous position that even you will be astonished at the distance traveled. Think about the people in Scripture who were declared finished by those around them. Think about Joseph. thrown into a pit by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, imprisoned and forgotten. Every chapter of his story looked like a final chapter to the people who were watching. Every new development seemed to confirm that he was finished, that the dreams God had placed in him were delusions, that the favor on his life was a figment of his imagination. His brothers had written the conclusion before the story was half begun. But God had not finished writing. And when God finished, the very brothers who sold him bowed before him. The very people who declared him done were standing in his presence in need of the very thing that only he could provide. The ending that God wrote for Joseph's story was so far beyond anything human calculation could have produced that the only explanation was the hand of God. Your story has that same author. Think about Job, who lost everything in a season so devastating that even his closest companions sat with him in silence because they could not find words adequate to describe the magnitude of what he had lost. They eventually found words, and those words were not words of faith. They were words of conclusion. They told him that surely he had sinned greatly to deserve such suffering. They analyzed his situation and delivered their verdict. Finished. Brought low by his own failings. No hope of restoration. But they were speaking to a man whose story God had not finished writing. And when God finished writing, Job received double everything he had lost. Not a restoration to his previous position. A doubling. An overflow that made the before look small in comparison to the after. The people who sat in judgment over his ruins were the same people who watched in silence as God rebuilt what they had declared irreparable. Your story has that same author. Think about the disciples standing at the foot of the cross on the day that looked like the most final ending in human history. The one they had followed, the one they had left everything for, the one who had spoken life over death and commanded the wind and the waves was hanging on a cross with what appeared to be every indicator of a story that had reached its conclusion. The religious leaders were satisfied. The crowds had dispersed. The disciples were hiding behind locked doors in fear and grief and confusion. They thought it was finished. They were wrong. 3 days later, the most impossible comeback in the history of all creation walked out of a sealed tomb and changed everything forever. And the resurrection did not just prove that Jesus was who he said he was. It proved something about the nature of God that applies directly to your life right now. God does not do finished. God does resurrection. God takes what was buried and brings it back breathing. God takes what was sealed behind a stone of impossibility and walks it out into the morning light. God takes the story that every human observer has closed the cover on and opens it back up to a chapter that nobody saw coming. That is who is writing your story. Now hear what God says specifically about you and about this season you have been walking through. God says, I have not forgotten the dreams I placed inside you before the pain came and tried to suffocate them. I have not forgotten the promises I made to you in the quiet places, the moments in prayer when you felt something so real and so specific that you wrote it down because you did not want to lose it. I have not forgotten the calling I placed on your life before you were even old enough to understand what calling meant. None of it has been revoked. None of it has been reassigned to someone else because you took too long or stumbled too many times or fell in ways that made you wonder if you had disqualified yourself permanently. You have not disqualified yourself. The enemy would love for you to believe that. The people who declared you finished would love for you to agree with them. But agreement with the wrong verdict is the only way a lie gains power over your future. And God is asking you today to stop agreeing with the conclusion that was spoken over you by people who do not have the authority to write your ending. Only God has that authority. And He has not written finished over your life. He has written not yet. He has written in preparation. He has written the best is still ahead. He has written what I began in this person I will complete. Because that is what His word promises in Philippians 1 verse 6. He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion. Not might carry it on. Will carry it on. Present active tense. Currently in progress. Already underway even in the seasons when you cannot feel the movement. The work is still in progress. You are still in progress. And what God is producing in you through this process is something that the finished version of you, the healed version, the restored version, the elevated version, is going to look back on with a gratitude so deep it will bring you to your knees. Because you will understand in that moment what you cannot fully understand right now. That every single thing that happened, every loss, every delay, every moment of public or private humiliation, every season of silence, every chapter that looked like an ending, was being woven by careful and loving hands into the most powerful testimony you could have ever carried. Your testimony is being written right now. In the valleys, in the silence, in the waiting, in the places where human logic has given up and only faith remains. God is writing something in those places that cannot be written anywhere else. He is producing something in you through this pressure that comfort and ease could never have produced. He is building a foundation under your feet through this shaking that will hold the weight of everything He is about to place on your life. And the weight of what is coming is significant. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. The people who said you were finished said it because they saw the weight of your calling and they calculated that you were not strong enough to carry it. What they did not know is that the very process they interpreted as your destruction was actually the training program for the strength you would need. You are not emerging from this season the same person who entered it. You are emerging stronger, deeper, more rooted, more refined, more clear about who you are and whose you are than you have ever been in your life. That is not the profile of someone who is finished. That is the profile of someone who is just getting started. God says to the ones who declared you done, watch what I do next. Not with anger. Not with the desire to humiliate those who humiliated you. God does not operate in revenge. But He does operate in vindication. And vindication is not about making your enemies suffer. It is about making the truth undeniable. It is about the moment when the evidence of God's faithfulness in your life becomes so clear, so visible, so impossible to argue with that even the people who were most certain you were finished have to stand in the presence of what God built and acknowledge that they were wrong. That moment is coming. It may not come tomorrow. God's vindication moves on His timeline, not yours. But it is coming with the same certainty that the sun rises every morning regardless of whether or not you were watching for it. It is coming because God does not make promises He does not keep. It is coming because the same God who declared His plans for you good in Jeremiah 29 verse 11 has not changed His mind. It is coming because the same God who said in Romans 8 verse 28 that all things work together for good has not retracted that promise for your specific situation. All things, including this. Including the thing that looked the most like an ending. Including the season that felt the most like abandonment. Including the loss that seemed the most permanent and the delay that felt the most personal and the silence that stretched so long you began to wonder if God had moved on to someone more deserving of His attention. He did not move on. He was never gone. He was working in ways you could not yet see toward an outcome you could not yet imagine, and He was doing it with a love for you that has never for a single moment wavered or diminished or reconsidered itself. You are deeply loved. You are carefully held. You are actively being worked on by the hands of a God who does not abandon his projects and does not walk away from his children and does not allow the declarations of limited human perspective to determine the destiny of the ones he has chosen. They said you were finished. God said, watch this. And what God is about to do in your life is going to be the most compelling answer to every doubt, every declaration of defeat, every whispered conclusion about your story that has ever been spoken. Watch what happens next. Because the same God who brought Joseph out of the pit, who brought Job out of the ashes, who rolled the stone away from the tomb on the third morning, is the God who is moving in your situation right now. And he has never once been late. He has never once been wrong. And he has never once left a story unfinished that he began. Your story is not finished. It is just getting to the part that everyone will remember. Hold on. You are seen. You are loved. You are not forgotten. And what is coming for you is worth every moment of everything you have endured to get here. This message was for you. You were meant to find it today. Now carry it forward with you. Because the comeback has already begun.